Sandi, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about your childhood and who you are.
Oh, well, it was pretty unusual. Grew up in Seattle, Washington, or just south of Seattle, Washington. Lived a pretty normal kid life. I'm old, so I was a latchkey kid. So after school was by myself, and getting ready for school was oftentimes by myself. So became really independent at a young age. Have a younger sister, and yeah, just pretty normal childhood.
What was one of your happiest moments growing up?
Oh, probably getting adopted by my stepdad had to been a very pinnacle, like best part of my life. Unfortunately, we lost him when I was 16, and he died in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
But having a father that was just amazing for that 10 years of my life was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
How was that feeling that love and then kind of losing the person who gave you that love?
Yeah, it was devastating. It was devastating. And hindsight, we can fall victim to tragedy, or we can rise above that and see where our next direction lies, and that really changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do. From the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be into emergency medicine. I wanted to be an ER doctor, or, something. I wanted to help people. I was fascinated by the body. I was fascinated by medicine, and I really wanted to help people. But because of those events in my life and other things that happened, my trajectory completely changed.
How so?
I had dreams of going to University of Washington, and unfortunately my mom and I don't have a great relationship, but I worked very hard. I was a straight A 4.0 student from 5th grade all the way through high school, even amidst my dad dying 6 weeks before my junior year started. And I had some just great teachers that were amazing mentors and just parental figures in my life through those last couple of years of high school. But I worked full-time job, or part-time job, full-time after school, and paid my own car insurance, my own car payment. I was responsible for everything, which meant I was basically working to have a car. I didn't really have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I think I was making $6 an hour, so it wasn't much. And all the insurance money that my mom had collected was squandered. So I didn't have anything to go to college with. And I didn't have anybody, we didn't have Google back then, so applying for scholarships, grants, and everything was a very long, tedious process, and I didn't have anyone guiding my steps with that. So I just worked and eventually met my husband. So
When did you meet your husband? How old were you?
I met my husband in 1994, just a few months before both of our 21st birthday. We're 12 days apart.
How was that? Where'd y'all meet?
In a bar.
I like it. You just hit it off.
Well, it's quite funny. He thought I was a stuck-up college girl. I could tell he was in the Air Force because I grew up in Seattle, right by McCord Lewis. It's now Joint Base Lewis McCord, sorry. And I had previously dated an Air Force guy, and I was like, oh, here we go again, you know. But we just became fast friends and spent the next 2 days together before I went back to Seattle because I was visiting family in Texas. He was stationed in Altus, Oklahoma, and was also visiting family, and we had a mutual friend that connected us together. So.
And he's an Air Force guy, and I do know a little bit about your story, and I know that obviously you guys have a long relationship, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit to when you guys got deployed to Germany, and that's where kind of things shifted for you, and you hit, would this be the hardest time that you had went through, at least internally and emotionally, that you had to get yourself out of? Because obviously you've had others, right? But that transition and that moving to a whole nother continent kind of was tough. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, that time of our life was definitely one of the top challenging moments of my life. We moved to Germany in 2002. And we had been stationed in California for a few years and Arizona for a few years. So I've been a military family for about 7 years or so. And when we got to Germany, we were really excited until I got there. It was a huge cultural change. You don't know the language. You don't have any friends. I had 3 small children. My youngest was 3. My oldest was about to turn 6. And it was really challenging with not knowing the language, moving into like totally different housing. Their houses are constructed very different from American houses. and just feeling really isolated. Seasonal depression was also a big problem for me. We left Arizona, so a very, very sunny, hot state. When we arrived in Germany, it was 52 degrees and raining. So it was, and that summer was not really what I would consider a true summer. It was really cold and just kind of wet. So that was a huge shift with everything, and it was quite overwhelming. And then being a stay-home mom, I had three children to take care of, and that was a challenge in itself, getting them in school and navigating all of that. I did discover Pampered Chef. I became a direct sales associate with Pampered Chef, and that was really fun. Unfortunately, it's not exactly healthy food. So, and that's my love language, is service, acts of service, and I love to cook for people and feed people and make sure that they feel loved, and make sure that, especially when in a military family, you have a lot of single airmen that don't have any family that are nearby. So we adopted family, and I love to cook and love to feed people. So needless to say, between being very sedentary and being isolated and depressed and eating not great food, and the German food was amazing. So it was great food, but it wasn't exactly healthy food. I gained about 30 pounds the first year that we lived there, and it just continued to come. The weight just kept coming on. By 2004 or 5-ish, I had reached a 50-pound weight gain, and it probably was a little over that. I just quit stepping on the scale because I was too embarrassed to see where I was at.
So that's down and out, internally at least.
Yeah, zero self-esteem, no confidence, just ashamed of what I look like. I didn't feel like I had, I really couldn't. I was active with my children as far as engaging with them, but I was not physically active with them. And that was hard.
How long was that period?
Like I said, I reached my max weight probably around 2004-ish, 2005. 2007 was my turning point. That's the year that's kind of started everything off, and it started in the spring of 2007, or excuse me, I guess early spring of 2007. We were in Austria skiing, and it was horrible skiing conditions that year. It was really icy and foggy, and it was our first or second run of the day, and I tore my ACL in just a fluke accident. My downhill ski slipped on ice and it popped my knee. And I chose not to have surgery, but it was a long recovery to strengthen that back up. But that introduced me to the gym. So I just kind of barely gotten started in the gym and realizing I kind of like doing exercise. And just in September of that year, I had to have my gallbladder taken out. And the markers for that are female, fat, 40, and fertile. So I was all of those things, except I was only 33 years old. So I knew that I was destroying my health and my body. That was a big wake-up call. And shortly after that, a friend of mine in my Pampered Chef team, who was 40, basically identical symptoms to me: sedentary, grossly overweight, high blood pressure that was not being treated, and she had a brain aneurysm. And her husband called me to be in the hospital with him that night, because they didn't think she was going to make it. And that was my rock bottom at that point. I'm like, I am going to leave my kids without a mom. I'm going to die because I'm too lazy, because I'm not doing anything, and I'm going to leave my kids without a mom and my husband without a wife. And that really hit hard, and that became my why, and it still is today.
You also said you went to therapy as well during that time. Am I correct on that?
No, I didn't actually seek a counselor, but my husband's been my rock from every part of my journey. He supported me no matter what. And he was incredibly pivotal in just encouraging me and just recognizing the small changes I was making, recognizing the efforts that I was putting in, and just he's just always been behind me with that.
So you find the gym, you see that you really like it.
Mm-hmm.
That helps lift your depression, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
oh, absolutely.
all the endorphins. I've seen the pictures. That's a lot. It's a lot of endorphins, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it becomes a passion for you, and it's part of, you find what I think you found what worked for you, and you want to share that with others. That hey, you can use your body to really uplift your overall health. And I want to know what are your own tenets within that, within just the physical health, and how that uplifts a person overall.
Science has proven that physical activity is pivotal in mental health, and not only getting there but keeping it. You know, it's not a one and done. I work on my mental health every day. You know, we all have our good days and our bad days. One of the first things that it was kind of a process of discovery, and when I became very consistent and deliberate about my physical activity in the gym, or just, you know, going out for walks and being more deliberate about my activity, the weight started coming off. You know, changing my eating habits and focusing on getting movement and, you know, doing some exercise. And again, I had a ton of support from my friends and from just people at the gym. It's a very encouraging environment, and I'll talk about that later. But the first 20 pounds that came off, you don't see it in yourself, because we look at ourselves every day, and it's really hard for us to see those small little changes taking place. And 20 pounds sounds significant, but when you're grossly overweight, 20 pounds to us, as we look at ourselves every day, sometimes we don't recognize how much we've actually accomplished. And it only took one person going, wow, you know, that hadn't seen me in a while. And that just launched me. I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. You know, somebody's recognizing, other than my husband, who I love, but of course, you know, he loves me no matter what. He loved me when I was fat. He loved me when I was a bodybuilder. He didn't care, you know. But then I started discovering how strong I was. And I think a lot of men and women don't recognize, just because you haven't been in the gym before doesn't mean you don't have strength.
Yeah.
Both emotionally and physically. Because being in the gym and making changes to your body, you have to get past a comfort zone. That takes mental strength. But it also takes physical strength to keep pushing yourself that hard. And then I didn't realize I had ever had that. Nobody had ever told me I was a strong woman, or that I was capable, or I was, you know, worthy. And really, truly, you have to discover that for yourself anyway. You know, people can tell you all they want, but you have to believe it. So when I started discovering my strength and building some confidence, then that propelled me to the next piece. But as you exercise, we, you know, talk about mental health. When you exercise, you sleep better. And because you're making all this progress in the gym, when you go home, you're making better choices. When you open the cupboard or the refrigerator, you're staying hydrated. Your mental health is, you just feel good about yourself. You feel that confidence. And so that starts radiating in every other aspect of your life, in your relationships with people, in the way you operate your business or your job or your career, the goals that you start setting. Because now I had a physical goal, but then I started setting personal goals as well, which I had never done before. I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't really know how to do that.
How'd you maintain that discipline? Because I know it's easy to go in the gym, right? It's easy. I work out. I do it mostly for my mental health, you know, to be honest, you know, and I get what I need in there. But to see someone take it to that next level requires an entirely different level of discipline and motivation. So without you ever having done that, right, in different sports, and not knowing that about yourself, how did you keep that discipline? Because that in and of itself is really, to me, always like the hardest part. How do you stay consistently disciplined?
I think part of it is I didn't even know the difference between a barbell and a dumbbell before I started my physical therapy. I seriously had never set foot in a gym before in my life. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was just like, well, what can I do next? What can I do next? So I discovered I'm a very goal-driven individual, and it's me against me. I wasn't comparing myself to anybody else. I didn't have anybody else. I didn't have any other female athletes to compare myself to. So I was like, well, if I can do that, well, maybe I can do that next. And the other piece of it I kind of discovered later in life is I have I think I have ADHD, adult ADHD. I was never formally diagnosed, but I will hyper focus, and I'm 100% or no percent.
Right.
And so when I hyper focus, I was all in. And for the next 10 years, that consumed my life.
And how'd you mesh that with the family life, the being a mom? Because that's a whole another, getting all that to work together, you know, how was that?
I epic failed the first few years. because I got so hyper focused, I let everything else kind of fall apart on outside of that. I wasn't as involved with my kids. All I did was the gym and bodybuilding and this and that. And it was my husband again who brought that to my attention in love, hey, what about us? And, that pendulum can swing too far to the side. I was super unhealthy, but then I swung that pendulum way too far to the other side, and it became an obsession, which is not healthy either. So for the first few years, it was a struggle. I was doing good things, but in the same turn, I was not doing good things. And I really started processing that and thinking about that. I grew up with horrible eating habits, and we don't know what we don't know. Back in the 70s, 80s, when I was growing up, we didn't have all the information we have today about what's okay and what's not okay. But one thing I knew that I didn't want to do is have my children grow up with poor body image, calling themselves fat, starving themselves to keep skinny or get skinny. Carbs are bad. All the fads that were present at the time and still are very present today. I wanted to make sure that the way I talked about myself was a reflection of how I wanted them to talk about themselves. And the way I talked about food, I wanted to talk about it in a healthy way as fuel and as important and necessary. Not that anything, I didn't want to say foods were good or bad, because I didn't want my children growing up with that information. I wanted to stop that cycle, if you will, of the generational effects that we have on our children, body image and food, and exercise. Exercise is good. We should all do it. And so that was another turning point, if you will, taking a look at how healthy lifestyle can actually be really unhealthy if you're not careful.
What is one of your quickest pointers on just a basic diet?
Just eat real food. Eat real food in moderation.
So go to the farmer's market.
Absolutely. Yeah, just real food. Try to stay away from anything that's got a long, ingredient list. And you can have everything. Cheese is good. Bacon's good. I drink red wine. That's my favorite. I mean, we lived in Germany for nearly 20 years. I love my wine. But everything in moderation. Everything in moderation. And I did the pendulum with that. I had a coach. My first coach was horrible and starved me and led me into almost disordered eating. I was super disciplined for the 4 months I was preparing. And after that, I would binge eat and gain it all back. And those first 3 years of my bodybuilding career were a disaster.
Was a disaster, but I would imagine that it's also exciting because it's something different and something new. And and you like it, and it's like a whole new scene for you, right? How was that going into that bodybuilding competition and being around other bodybuilders, and then you going up there and doing your thing?
The first contest was the very first time I'd ever been in a bikini in my life, because I had horrible body image. I was embarrassed about the way I looked. I'd never worn a bikini in my life. So the first time I stood in a bikini, funny enough, is in front of 6 judges judging my body. So
that's a way to break it in, right? Like, hey,
trial by fire, right? So, and I just was blessed to be like really successful from the very beginning. My first show was just a military show. I had 2 other women that I competed against, and they were photobomb.
It's okay.
2 women that were absolutely amazing women. And because I won that show, the judges at that show were actually from a natural bodybuilding federation in Scotland. And I got invited to compete at a pro qualifier in Scotland. I was all excited until I got there. And I broke down ugly crying. I was seriously hyperventilating, ugly crying in my hotel room after weigh-ins, because I saw all the other women come in, and I was like, when you're getting ready for a bodybuilding competition, you win your first show. Well, you're a big fish in a small pond. When you go to a national competition with women that have been doing this for years.
And this is you're crying before you go to okay.
No, I'd done my weigh-in in Scotland. And then as I'm doing my weigh-in, I'm watching all these other women weigh in, and I'm like, I don't belong here. And I freaked out.
It's intimidating.
It's incredibly intimidating. But again, you can either fall victim to just circumstance like I don't belong here, or you can pull up your pants and get out there and do your best. That I brought my best that I had at that moment in time. Did I look like a bodybuilder? Probably not, compared to everyone else.
But it
But
inspired you.
I brought my best that day.
Was your husband there?
Absolutely.
How important is having that support in in whatever endeavor you choose?
Crucial. Absolutely crucial. I could not have done it without him. I could not have done it without my friends, my clients that supported me. I had so much support.
What's the biggest factor of that support? Is it just the presence? Is it the words? Is it all of it?
It's accountability. When you say you're going to do something and somebody else knows it, you said it out loud, it becomes very real. If you don't speak your goals out loud, they're imaginary, and we will let ourselves fail every time. When you share that with somebody else, now they know and they want you to succeed. Most people in your life are your biggest cheerleaders. They want to see you achieve everything you've set out to do. And I had great friends like, didn't you say you were going to not go out to dinner? Or my husband was awesome. Did you drink all your water today? My kids were the biggest tattletales. If I didn't do something or if I did something I wasn't supposed to, they were like, Mom. So, but that accountability, and we need to be admonished. We need to be, take responsibility for our actions. But again, it's in love. It's not in a negative way. And there might be some people that do want to see you fail. And those are the people that I'm not going to quit. Tell me I can't do something. Well, just sit back and watch me. I'll show you. So.
How do you define love?
My husband and I we're celebrating 29 years of marriage next month. And love is fighting for what's important to you. And that means through the good and the bad when we set our vows, through thick and thin and through better for worse, richer for poor, we meant it. And someone that is going to accept you for who you are with all of your mistakes, with all of your shortcomings, and receive what you want to give them, they have to receive your love too. I think it's all of that.
You had said that, when you struggled with that time in Germany, that there was a lack of self-worth, and you didn't use the words lack of self-love. How does it feel to have that now?
It's incredible. And I want to help other people discover that.
What's your main conduit to do that?
Personal training.
Events?
And events, yeah.
Events?
Yeah.
You also got a big event coming up. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah. No, when we moved, during my time in Landstuhl, little backstory, I had the opportunity to work with a team of physicians that had put together a program. It began with our special forces, Army and Air Force Special Forces guys. And these guys are determined. As soon as they wake up from anesthesia, they want to head back to their unit. They are driven because they don't want to let their team down. But they're not healthy. Even after the stitches come out, the bones aren't broken anymore, they're not healthy. So the physicians really understood that wellness isn't just healing an injury. There's so much more involved. There's mobility, nutrition. A lot of our guys suffered massive TBIs, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, the mental health aspect. They went through surgery, they went through physical therapy, they went through chronic pain management. And then I was invited to be part of that team as a strength and conditioning coach. Because if you've got hardware in your body, if you've had any type of severe injury, especially brain injury where your balance is off, you have to relearn how to move your body. And there's maybe some limitations and some modifications that need to be done to your exercise routine in order for you to get strong again, to atrophy from healing and things like that. So that really opened my eyes to the importance of the whole person wellness, not just lifting weights and eating clean. That was one aspect of it. I started to really understand the whole person wellness. So during that time, I had the privilege of getting introduced to now one of my very best friends, like my big brother. He was a special forces guy. He was my workout partner. And the person that transported him to Landstuhl was a 2-time bronze medalist world champion wrestler. And they were getting ready for Olympic trials coming up. And she was just like, how in the world are you so strong and so lean? how many hours of cardio do you do in the sauna? And I'm like, cardio in the
Yeah, cardio in the sauna.
I don't do there. Our saunas fits like 3 people. I'm not doing much in there but sitting and just warming up. Germany's cold in the wintertime. And so I was invited to come to Colorado to the Olympic Training Center and work with some of the Olympic women's wrestling team. And so that was a great experience. And I was shocked to discover that at the time, culture's changed in 10 years, but at the time the dining facility was atrocious for any weight-based athletes. It was great for the endurance athletes. Think Michael Phelps is chowing calories, but for a weight-based athlete, it was horrible, horrible. So I did some coaching and counseling on, proper nutrition, how to, get really, really lean, but keep your strength and then maintain that in a healthy way off season. So when it came time for us to leave Germany, all of that information that I had, I'm like, well, first of all, we didn't have a place to call home anymore. Germany was our home. So we were kind of looking at the map and going, where do we want to live? We don't know. We don't really have a place to go back to. And I'm like, well, I know some folks in Colorado and Olympic Training Centers there. It's a super healthy state. It's hiking, biking, skiing, snowboarding, all the things. Let's just give that a shot. And it was great because Colorado is we are top 5 healthiest state in the recent poll. We're in the top 5 of all 50 states for being healthiest. But after being here a few years, I also discovered a horrifying statistic that we are number 7 for suicide rates. And that's disgusting to me.
Why do you think that is? Why would you do you have any guesses as to why that is?
I don't know. So we've only lived here 5 years, but 2 of those years were COVID. So I feel like, I got cheated out of a couple of years, but I'm still learning my community. And a lot of people are like, well, it's the military. Those numbers do not include military suicides. Those are our Colorado citizens that are non-military, non-active duty. So some of those are probably veterans. There is a lot of science about altitude and how it affects mental health. So that is potentially part of the problem. But to be number 7, we've got some work to do.
And the wholeness approach, what about the spiritual dynamic, right? I know you talked to me about the pillars of just the overall wellness. I think, obviously what you eat, your physical body. I was in prison for several years, and even in prison, we would tell each other it's mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely.
To get through.
Absolutely.
That you can't just stay in your cell. You got to get out. You got to do some push-ups, do some pull-ups. You got to reach something that lifts you up or focus on something that lifts you up, because if you don't, the environment will take over a lot of what you are. So, how do we implement, what's the spiritual aspect to help with the mental health? And if, I know a lot of people aren't spiritual, but you can equate the spiritual with the emotional health almost. And what are some of the things you do in that regard?
Yeah, everybody, we always talk about a higher power, even in a 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever, there's a 12-step program, and you do, most people at least acknowledge a higher power and, or like you said, emotional health or spiritual health in the realm of more of a, not necessarily an entity or being, but just nature.
Yeah.
And just, meditation, reading, journaling, praying, whatever that looks like for a person. If you can get your mind right, then you can, think about if you've got all these to-do lists and everything, even if I go down to the gym, but I haven't calmed my mind, I can't focus truly and give 100%.
It's not as fun working out when you do it like that too. Yeah.
No. So if you have to make a list, and get all your to-do list down and get that done before you go, then your whole mind is focused on mind-muscle connection and how is my body moving and working right now? What changes are going on in my body, and how am I challenging my body to make those changes? But if we can't calm our mind and get those things at least down on paper, even if it's temporary, that's okay. You're not going to solve a problem by journaling one time, right. and it takes practice to do that. It's also a discipline. So, and what I tell people is nothing I have done has ever been done all at once and perfectly. It has been, even shortly before my retirement, I still was working on lots of things. And you just work on different things. You have to build your foundation before you put the roof on the house. So you set a solid foundation of some things, and then you start building on that. But there's always little things you can do.
Yeah, you keep adding, but you have to have a solid foundation so that when things get tough, you're not falling below that.
Right. And it's not a direct line either. You're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes you're going to take 1 step forward and 4 steps back. It's okay. The biggest thing is don't quit. And that's where that accountability really comes in. If you share your goals and be honest with the people that you've asked to hold you accountable. I'm struggling today. I'm having a really hard time, and I need your help when we go out to dinner tonight. Is it okay if we have the server not bring chips and salsa until my plate is in front of me? Because I'm really struggling right now, and I feel like if I eat 1 chip, I'm going to eat the whole basket. And my, the
I
friends
always
that love
eat the
you,
whole basket.
I mean, why do you think I gave that example? We all do. We all do. But being honest about where we're weak, being honest about where we need help and how we need help. And if you let somebody know, I need your help, I need you to help me with this. If I asked you, or if a really good friend of yours asked you for help, are you going to tell them no?
Of course not.
But so many people are afraid to ask. But if we ask somebody that we love and trust, why wouldn't they? And if they asked us to do the same thing, of course we want to help them because we love and care about them. And it's usually such a trivial thing to them. It's a monumental thing in our minds, and it's a trivial thing to them.
I know that you pursued a dream and have lived a dream, probably multiple dreams. We all have multiple dreams. One dream could have been, your husband, your family, things in your youth, and then the bodybuilding, another dream, like a new dream. What's your dreams now?
My dream is, I guess we briefly mentioned the expo. When I discovered that Colorado is in such a horrible state as far as the mental health is concerned, because I want to help people, I want them to feel good and feel loved and feel confident and feel strong and love themselves and be able to pay that forward again. We have all that we need in this community to do that. There's just a disconnect. There are so many amazing nonprofit organizations, mental health organizations, local businesses that exist for the good of our community. Inherent Men's Clothing is one of them in downtown Colorado Springs. They exist to talk about men's mental health. And even the CEO of our Better Business Bureau here is a huge, huge advocate for mental health and small businesses that support that. We have the perfect recipe to make our state the one that the nation looks to for health and wellness as a whole, not just one piece of it, but a whole. How do I bring all of those things together so that we can work together and really stand out and make some significant changes? If you take a rope apart, the strands by themselves are very weak, but you put 1,000 strands together and twist them up, they're unbreakable. And we need to do that in our communities, not just in Colorado Springs or in Denver or in Colorado, but nationwide. If all of our communities can do that, we can make significant change. It takes time, and it sounds a little altruistic, but I believe it can happen.
It's worth trying.
It's worth a shot. I'm willing to work for it. So yeah, my dream is to have our expo, which is currently it'll be its 2nd year in February. We want to make it an educational event. Most expos, people kind of just walk around looking for, the free pens and the free samples and this and that, and there's not any connections or relationships being built. We want to change that. We really want true connections being made between our community and our businesses, and also the businesses. There's so many businesses that complement each other and would be stronger together, working together. We don't want people just kind of walking around checking things out. We want them to learn and go home with something valuable, whether that's we're going to have a Narcan workshop at our throughout the day at our expo. We're going to equip people to potentially save lives. We're going to have a blood donation. So give a pint of blood and you can save a life. You know, there's so many ways for people to give back to our community just by being there. And then, of course, the education, if we can educate people and send them home with information, what to do when a family member gets into crisis. Or if you kind of see them headed down, they're not themselves before it gets to crisis mode. Let's fix it before that point. And there's so many resources here available, but people don't know what they don't know. So we're really trying to just educate our community.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think my biggest thing is everyone has a story. The people that I've worked with over 15 years now, you look at them and they're amazing human beings. They're like incredibly productive members of society. They're super smart. They're beautiful. They're strong. They're all the things that we visually see. And if we're friends, you know, they're great people. What we don't know is that I've worked with people that, you know, in special forces that have seen and done things that no one should ever have to endure. I had a client that was sexually trafficked, drugged and sexually trafficked over the border of Mexico when she was 6 years old with her stepbrother. I've had a woman that was part of an arranged marriage and her husband tried to snuff out her 4-month-old child with a pillow in front of her to torture her. And these are people that are in front of us every day. This is not because I traveled to a foreign country. These are United States citizens that have endured these things. These are men and women that we're in contact with every day, and we walk past them every day, and we don't know until we take time to really, truly care for somebody, establish a relationship, establish trust, and really learn their story. I can teach people how to squat or bench press or do any exercise all day long. I can write a meal plan for somebody all day long. I can't get them healthy until I understand how they got to where they are, because that's where the mental health piece is. And if we don't have mental health, we can't fix anything else.
How do you integrate the story of the person? How does that integrate into your process with physical fitness?
Just having compassion. I think people are too quick to judge. You see somebody and, you know, I think, and part of it is human nature, but part of it is just our cultural biases. You know, we see somebody that's overweight and we think they're lazy or they eat too much. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they have a medical condition, or maybe they do emotionally eat and they don't recognize it because they have a trauma from 40 years ago that has never been addressed because they're ashamed. And so to fill that void, food becomes their comfort, no different than drugs or alcohol. And if we understand that about a person, then we can really just be there to listen, be there as a friend, be there as support, have compassion, have love and respect for that person, and that can change everything.
Yeah,
that can
seeing
change
the
everything.
seeing the person beyond the shame.
Yep.
It's powerful. It's powerful. I know that, you know, I've shared a lot of stories, and a lot of times we talk about the hurt, the pain, because it changes us. And, you know, where I'm at now is focusing on the love that changes us deeply. And a lot of times when I talk to people, and one of the questions I would ask in a just another story setting would be, what's the happiest moment in your life? And a lot of times I get quick answers on the opposite of that. And on the happiest moment, I'll get a pause or you know, there's some real thinking, like, man, what's the happiest moment? Or searching for something like that, right, within their memories. And it's tough. You know, I always ask that question to try and get the good and the bad of the story so that we can both see that, you know, the good's, the bad's there, it's ugly, but the beautiful is there too.
Yep.
And we have to address the bad, but what we need to focus on is the good and moving forward and things like that. And I think you have to know the person's story to do that holistically. And I think that is what you do. I haven't seen what you do within your fitness program, but when you talk about knowing somebody's story, that you subtly do that you bring the whole person into your gym. Like, hey, this isn't just about you looking good and feeling good. This is about you just being good all the way around. And, you know, that's an art in and of itself, which is why I was curious to see, you know, how do you integrate that? And I think the way you answered it is how I would imagine it, that it's more subtle than anything. Like, you can bring that here too, and it's accepted here too. What you've been through isn't necessarily who you are, you know, and that is healing, you know, and to give somebody a space to do that, and then to see the growth, you know, the physical growth, right? Like what happened with you, you saw the growth and you're like, oh, I can do this. And that's a beautiful place to be in, because you see a part of yourself that you've never seen or believed in.
Right.
But it was always there. It just wasn't
Gotta
tapped.
tap into.
It just wasn't tapped into.
Yeah. And I think just when you can look back at any tragedy or trauma or mistake that you've made and realize that you are the person you are because of those things. I'm not ashamed of any mistake I've made. And in fact, I've been asked a couple times, if there's anything you could go back and change in your life, what would it be? And there is absolutely nothing I would change, because if I changed anything in my past, I would not be the person I am sitting in this chair right now. And I like who I am. I love who I am. And I love that I have all those mistakes and traumas and bad things that happen to me, whatever that might be, because now I can view people through a different set of eyes. I can view them with compassion and patience, and I want to help them, you know. And had I not gone through that, maybe I wouldn't.
What was one of those things that you had gone through specifically?
I think growing up, I was told I was never good enough. No matter how I could get a straight A report card, but it was either my mom did it better, or there was always something, you know, I could never do anything just right. And I grew up with that for a very long time. It took me into my adult years to realize that's not who I am. Just because she says that, I don't have to accept that. And again, discovering strength and confidence and self-worth, self-love, like you said, that's something that I want everybody to experience, no matter what they've done, no matter who said what to them, no matter what experiences they've had. You can choose who you want to be. You can break cycles. You can be different. You can parent different. You can be a different spouse. You can be who you want to be, and you can be the best version of yourself. It takes time, and it might take some support from other people, but you can do that.